Before we get into the mechanics, just take a second and subscribe to Atten Recounts, would you? If you care about how history actually worked on the ground, not, the polished version, this channel is built for you. Tonight's topic is one of those quiet killers of wartime survival that honestly rarely gets the attention it deserves: sleep on frozen ground. Soldiers in World War II did not fail because they lacked courage. They failed because cold stole calories, judgment, circulation, and, eventually, life. What you're about to hear is not folklore. These are field-proven methods used by infantrymen from the Eastern Front to the Ardennes, and, they remain relevant to anyone who studies survival, military history, or cold-weather operations. The ground was the enemy long before the cold air was. World War II soldiers quickly learned that frozen earth pulls heat faster than wind ever could. Even at, modest sub-zero temperatures, direct contact with soil could drain core body heat within minutes. Veterans wrote repeatedly that men who wrapped themselves well but slept directly on the ground still woke shaking or not at all. The first lesson was simple and, brutal. Insulation under the body mattered more than insulation on top. German and Soviet manuals both emphasized ground separation as a priority, even above blankets, because, conduction was the real threat. How soldiers created insulation layers when issued gear was not enough. Pine boughs, straw from abandoned barns, dried reeds, and even folded uniforms were layered beneath the body. On the Eastern Front, Red Army troops were trained to build a minimum of 20 to 30 centimeters of organic material before lying down. The practical application today is, pretty straightforward. If you find yourself in cold terrain without a sleeping pad, your first task isn't building shelter walls. It's actually building up some thickness beneath you. Dead vegetation traps air, and, trapped air is insulation. Now, why did raised sleeping platforms save lives in forests and ruins? In wooded areas and bombed-out cities, soldiers improvised raised beds using doors, fence panels, ammunition crates, or even logs. Elevation broke direct contact with frozen ground and, importantly, allowed air circulation beneath, which reduced moisture buildup. American troops in the Ardennes Forest, they actually documented using interlocked saplings lashed with wire to keep bodies off the snow. For modern application, even just a few inches of elevation using branches or debris can dramatically reduce heat loss. The principle remains unchanged: separate the body from the earth at all costs. How body positioning reduced heat loss during sleep. Soldiers were taught to sleep curled rather than stretched out. A compact posture? It reduced surface area exposure and protected major arteries in the groin and armpits. Men often slept on their sides, with knees drawn up, arms tucked tight, and heads covered. In extreme cold, pairs of soldiers sometimes slept back to back to share radiant heat while maintaining alertness. Survival instructors today still teach this method because it conserves energy without burning calories. The role of vapour barriers, and why, honestly, dry mattered more than warm. Wet clothing killed faster than cold air. World War II troops learned to keep one dry layer reserved only for sleep. Socks were dried inside tunics during the day, or placed near body heat. Some soldiers wrapped feet in newspaper or oilcloth to block moisture transfer from the ground. German mountain troops used waxed fabric as an early vapour barrier under blankets. The lesson for modern use is clear, really. Prevent moisture from reaching insulation. Even plastic sheeting between the ground and bedding can mean the difference between functional sleep and hypothermia. How soldiers used heat retention tricks without lighting fires, you know. Open flames were often impossible due to enemy detection. Instead, soldiers relied on retained heat. Heated stones were buried under bedding when tactically safe, but never placed directly against the body. Canteens filled with hot water were wrapped in cloth and placed near the core or feet. World War II field manuals warned against overheating, which caused sweating and later freezing. Today, the same method applies. Heat the environment indirectly, store warmth, and let it release slowly overnight. Why eating before sleep was a survival strategy, not just comfort. Calories equal heat. Soldiers were instructed to eat fat-heavy rations before sleeping in cold conditions. Lard, chocolate and meat were preferred because digestion generates internal warmth. Men who skipped meals to save rations often paid for it overnight. From a modern survival standpoint, this remains valid. Never go to sleep cold and underfed. Even a small calorie intake before rest can stabilize body temperature for hours. You know, discipline and routine really did protect soldiers from cold-related collapse. It might sound simple, but sticking to a strict regimen often made the difference between survival and disaster. One overlooked factor was, well, routine. Units enforced foot checks, sock changes, and rotation schedules, even while under fire. Men were actually ordered to wake up periodically, move their fingers and toes, and, importantly, check on each other. These practices prevented frostbite and made sure that no one silently slipped into hypothermia. If we apply this today, it means never sleeping deeply in extreme cold without safeguards. Things like alarms, shared watches, or timed movement breaks can, quite literally, save lives. What World War II sleeping methods teach modern survivalists and historians, well, it's quite revealing. These techniques were not romantic by any means. They were, in fact, born from failure, death, and some rather hard correction. Soldiers adapted because they absolutely had to, and the environment punished mistakes immediately. For historians, this really sheds light on casualty rates, morale collapse, and operational delays. For survivalists, it just reinforces a timeless rule: ground insulation, dryness, calories, and discipline matter a great deal more than expensive gear. If this breakdown gave you a deeper respect for how soldiers endured conditions most people never will, do consider subscribing to Atten Recounts. Share this with someone who studies military history or survival seriously. These lessons are not obsolete. They are proven, and honestly, they're worth preserving.